gospel passage this week is from the book of Matthew. This is chapter 10, verses 26 to 39. So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing is secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light. And what you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. And even the hairs of your head are all counted. So do not be afraid. You are of more value than many sparrows. Everyone, therefore, who acknowledges me before others, I also will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever denies me before others, I also will deny before my Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And one's foes will be members of one's own household. Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. That's a hard one. Just acknowledge that at the start. This passage that I just read is a continuation of where we've been in Matthew for the last few weeks now. So 2 weeks ago, Paul, is he with the kids right now? No. 2 weeks ago, Paul preached on the beginning of this longer passage, and it's where Jesus is preparing to send his disciples out ahead of him into towns and cities that he's planning to visit himself. And he tells them that he's going to give them power to heal diseases. He's going to give them power to cast out demons. And he sends them out to do all of this literally empty-handed. So he tells them not to bring any extra clothing with them. They're not supposed to bring an extra pair of sandals. They're not supposed to bring walking staffs, which they would have used to protect themselves. And they're not even allowed to bring any money with them. So he sends them out completely vulnerable and relying completely on the hospitality of strangers. And he also prepares them for hardships that he says that they will have to endure. So he tells them, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. He says that they will be arrested, that they'll be dragged before kings and before governors, that brothers will betray brothers, parents will betray children, and some of them will even lose their lives, all on account of Jesus. And that is what leads up to the passage that I just read. And that passage starts with, have no fear of them. And this might sound like a dumb or obvious question, but what is Jesus preparing them to do? Or what is he encouraging them to keep doing in the face of hostility? Think about that. He continues by saying, nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered. Nothing is secret that will not become known. And what I tell you in the dark, I want you to say it in the light. What you hear whispered, proclaim it from the housetops. So Jesus is preparing them to keep talking when people want them to be quiet. He wants them to keep proclaiming. So he's not necessarily talking here about following his interpretation of the law, right? Which he outlines in the Sermon on the Mount, right? So the disciples could love their enemies, follow all of Jesus's other teachings, and maybe no one would have any problem with them. Maybe then they wouldn't face any resistance. People probably wouldn't be trying to kill them because of that. Note, Jesus says that they will be hated because of his name. So it's the person of Jesus. And the disciples' claims about who Jesus is, that is what is going to elicit this resistance and violent response. And so Jesus says, nothing is covered up that's not going to be uncovered. This isn't going to remain a secret, my identity. So knowing that, just proclaim it from the housetops without fear. So don't let your fear of other people keep you from telling people who I am. Because in the end, it's going to be made known. And to me, this sounds like Jesus kind of saying, just tear off the Band-Aid. Get it over with. Yell it from the housetops. This message will be communicated. It's going to be revealed. But Jesus is also very clear that just because it will be revealed doesn't mean that the revealing of it is going to be easy. He's very clear-eyed and honest with the disciples here, right? Don't think that this is going to happen without a struggle and without real costs, because this is going to create real, serious conflict. It's going to make some people very angry. And it's not just going to make strangers angry. He's telling them this will probably rupture some of your very closest relationships, even possibly within your own families, between parents and children, between siblings. And Jesus says straight up, in those situations, I want you to choose me. And that's quite a demand. I am not a parent, but I cannot imagine choosing anything or anyone over my child if I had one. And it makes me wonder, what would this possibly have looked like? In what situation would someone need to choose Jesus over their own child? Well, Jesus was not saying, disown your family if they don't follow me. The situation that he was speaking to the disciples was actually probably the opposite of that. So the disciples and other followers of Jesus, they would have been the ones being rejected and disowned by their families for claiming faith in Jesus. So Jesus is saying, if your family rejects you, even if your own parents reject you, even if your own children reject you, on account of me, I want you to stay strong and choose me. And again, I mean, that is quite a demand. And I can't imagine having to make that decision, especially at that time and place when your security came from your family, even more so then than now. And Jesus tells them, he says it 3 times in this passage. These are really hard teachings, but I do not want you to be afraid. And you have to wonder, what would give somebody the strength, the courage, or the conviction to make a decision like that, right? Where you could lose your family, or even your very life. Well, Jesus says, don't fear those who can only kill the body, as if that were easy. It's just life. It's just your body. And the next sentence is even tougher to me. Fear the one who can destroy your body and your soul. Well, he goes on to say, in a kind of very poetic way, consider the sparrows. You know, you see people selling these little birds 2 for 1 penny. 2 for 1 single penny. And Jesus says, yet not one of those sparrows, right? These things that are so cheap in human eyes, not a single one falls to the ground unperceived by God. And now consider the worth that you have in God's eyes. In fact, God knows every single hair that is on your head. That is how well God knows you. That is how much God cares for you. And it is that truth and that conviction of God's love and care for them. That is what gave those early followers of Jesus the strength to do everything that they did. I just finished rereading the book of Acts, and it is almost unbelievable what those early apostles did on behalf of Jesus. They kept being beaten, imprisoned, chased out of towns, some of them killed, driven out of one place, and then they would just go on to the next place and do the same thing over and over again in order to proclaim the person of Jesus. And that truth that they perceived of God and Jesus's love and care for them, that is what made all of that struggle possible, right? That is what kept them going. And ultimately, I think that is the message that they were bringing to those people. That was the message itself. The message of the cross and the resurrection, of God's love for humanity. And so that's the foundation that it all stands on, right? Our worth in God's eyes. We sometimes think of God's love as kind of a soft, comforting, fuzzy feeling or idea. And it is comforting, it's powerful. But I think it is also a very hard truth, meaning that it is very solid, it's strong, it's firm. In the psalm today, the psalmist writes, I will tell them that your love stands firm forever, and that your fidelity is fixed in the heavens. And I think that has to be the case, because it's the foundation that supports very hard decisions. That hard, immovable truth has to be solid enough to support decisions that shake things that to us feel like the very foundations of life. Things like relationships with family members, maybe. For the apostles, even life itself. When I think about the history of the church and all of the passion and all of the sacrifice that it took to get the message of Jesus all the way here to us, through all those years, through all that distance, it is like a miracle. And I think in a lot of ways, our faith rests on the faith of those early followers, right? And their conviction of God's love for them. And it is miraculous, if you think about it. That conviction and that knowledge, it can be like a superpower. It's the message, again, of the cross and the resurrection. So I want to come back to that idea of proclamation. So Jesus says to the disciples, you must be willing to acknowledge me before others. And what this points to, I think, is the centrality of communication to the gospel. Jesus calls his mission the good news, right? It's something to share, something to tell people about and spread. And for the disciples, it was actually literally news. It was new. As they traveled around the Mediterranean world after Jesus' resurrection, they were telling people something that they had never heard before. Obviously, that is not our context. Everyone knows the name of Jesus. We have 2,000 years of church history. Jesus is probably the most well-known historical figure ever at this point. So I'm just going to ask, a couple questions for us to ponder for a couple minutes in silence. Today, what is newsworthy about the gospel and about the person of Jesus? What is worth proclaiming? What could sound new about him? And at the same time, what is Jesus telling us not to be afraid of? So we'll take a few minutes to think about those questions.